Hey, what's up? My name is John Silva. We're gonna continue with how to render different types of metal, and we have our last cube here. Now, we had really a lot of fun with the raw gold and the weathered steel. If you haven't watched these, please go watch it, especially the raw gold. We went through all of the basics of type of metal and how it's made, etc. Check it out. With the weathered steel, we try to give you the story. What are we gonna do to it? And that's what we're also gonna do with the polished copper. We're gonna make up a story, or at least think of what could happen to it. Now this is polished, but even though it's polished, I want to give it character. Now it's a little bit like the weathered steel, except we're gonna tone it down a lot more. I want to give it a couple of scratches. Looking at it, yeah, a couple of scratches, maybe little bit around the edges, some discoloration. But aside from that, there's gonna be some shininess to it, and mostly I feel like we're gonna spend the most time in the color, actually, to give it a nice range of color, because copper color is it's kind of tricky to get. So yeah, let's get right into it. Now I have a separate layer for this guy. Now we're kind of gonna repeat the same thing as we did with the raw gold and weathered steel. There's just no other way around when I started with grayscale. So open up the hue saturation. If you don't know, if this is the first video you're watching, then you go to image, adjustment, and hue saturation. You click in there. I have it key binded. You can change it. So I just press one key and this pops up. Now let's move this around. Polished copper. Click on colorize. And now copper color. To not be mistaken with the gold color, because gold color has a lot of reds in it, or a lot of red range in it. The copper, however, it's more of a magenta mixed with red kind of thing, kind of color. So actually, let's go for it. Like that. So a bit more saturation, the lightness. Yeah, let's bring the lightness a little bit down in this case, and press. Okay, I can see a couple of lines there that shouldn't be. Now same thing, there's this pretty cool tool called replace color. We go to image, adjustment, replace color. Again, I can just press one key and it's key binded. So you'll see a lot of times this window pop up. Now what does this do? I click on whatever value and color, and it's gonna make a selection here, and I can just boom change the freaking color, right? Which is pretty neat. Now looking at gold, copper. I wanted to have orange on the light as opposed to yellow, because we don't want to mix it in with the gold. They're kind of similar, but let's do exactly that. Let's give it just a tiny little bit like that. I feel like copper has a lot of warmth, obviously, and even if the light is cold, feels like anyway the reflection of it is gonna be a warm glow. So I'm gonna make it fuzziness higher. Yeah, just yeah, about there. Looks all right. Now open up the same thing. Let's see here on the shadow side. I want it to be more, have a more of a magenta in it. Now let's drop the fuzziness, basically make the selection more narrower. More narrow. Let's give it a little bit more magenta and darken it a tiny bit more, and the same on the darkest side of the cube. Bit of a, just a tiny little bit of a magenta in it. Now don't feel like you have to make it hyper realistic. If you do, by all means, just you know, make the colors exactly the same. But I like to give it, push the colors just a tiny little bit more, not too far, but just a tiny little bit. I feel like it gives character to us, even to a simple object, right? Now here on the lightest part right there, I want it to be a little on the orange side. That, where the lightness just a tiny little bit, and press OK. Right. So here on the edge part, actually, I want it to have a little bit of a orange towards yellow color worn out. So that's basically what we're gonna go for here. I'm gonna slowly build this up. Right now you don't see much of the yellow, and that's okay. As long as you build it up, you're good to go. Here on this edge as well. Now it's gonna be polished, but have just the edges and a couple of scratches. It's not really gonna hurt it, right? It should be all right. Gonna do exactly that. Now I'm gonna make this definitely more yellow, and I'm gonna increase the saturation of it, but we're gonna press the pen down very gently, so that if I press down quite hard, then you can see a lot of the color coming through. But again, we're kind of building it up, so we're gonna go and do it gently. I'm gonna start making this just a little bit larger here in the corners. It's a little bit more worn out in the corners, and that's okay. Again, we gotta make sure that we don't go too far. Once we're done with the worn out parts, I'm gonna make this cube a little bit more shiny some areas, so that there's gonna be a little bit more of a reflection going on. I'm noticing some of these areas are a little bit too much, but I really like worn out stuff, so kind of going by my instincts here. So let's push this back a little further and make it a little bit more cleaner. Like so. Now, how polished do we want this? Do we want it like mirror-like? I don't really think that's cool. Do we want semi? So that you can see a little bit of a reflection perhaps from the floor. So we would have a bit of grace here. And also a bit of reflection from the light source. I think that could give some nice interesting character. So with that said, I go ahead and I'm gonna grab color dodge tool. If you watch the two previous videos, you'll know that I use this a lot to give some glow to the objects that I'm painting. So let's pick a soft round brush, set to highlights, protect tones, and let's just test it out, pass it gently. Right now I'm just seeing if this brush is good enough for that. I feel like it's a little too textury, so I'm actually gonna go with 100% smooth brush like that. Now the corners here, even though they may be a little worn out, I want it to have some speculars to it. It's little details, but I feel like it goes a long way. Like so. Yeah, okay. That. Now, gonna go back to a normal painting brush. I'm gonna soften some areas out where I see there's a little bit too much roughness in it. So increase the saturation in some areas. As I said, colors, it's the main thing I'm gonna focus on this cube. Give it a nice interesting color variation. Since we're not introducing any kind of texture, we're gonna use light and mainly color to make it interesting, like an interesting copper cube. Go there. So it goes across. It's alright. Let's introduce a little bit of saturation in between the light, the highlight, and shadow here. Well, it's not really shadow. The whole top part is exposed to light, but just trying to make it a little bit more interesting. Now I'm gonna grab a brush that's a little harder with a bit of a texture to it, but we're gonna render it. Even though it has texture, we're gonna make sure it's smooth enough to look like it's polished. I'll give a little bit of a stroke feeling to it. A bit of a maybe it's been, what you call it, there's this machine that's kind of round and you kind of polish it and it leaves rays of stroke like that on the metal. I forgot the name of that tool, but a grinder, I believe. No, maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, that's the kind of look, you know what I mean. That's the kind of look I want to give mostly. Now I feel like I could go a little harder on the highlight here. Let's see. Let's unprotect the tone so it actually can become towards white, no, okay. Different, we'll go with a different way of doing this. So I want this, I'll make it in red. I want this area here, this highlight here, to be more towards orange, yellowish orange. I don't know how to call it, but for that I'm gonna set my brush mode to overlay. I'm gonna pick color that kinda like that. Yeah, like that. So I'm gonna gently go over it, like right here. Yeah. Gonna do that. It's more like it. Now set my brush mode to normal, come back in and paint. Every time I do a change with another tool than the brush or any layer mode, whatever change I make that's not made by hand but made by the computer, I always go over it and paint it over to give it a more natural feeling and less of a digital looking feeling. That's what I'm into. And there you go. I mean, looks interesting enough. Let's go and pay attention to the rest of the cube faces and choose a different direction. Maybe it's been polished to the right, so I'm gonna do brush strokes that are gonna leave marks like that. As I said, there's always a way to make this interesting, even with the simplest forms or shapes or whatever you're painting. If you really think about it, you can always come up with something, even if it's minimal, to make it interesting. Now this one goes to the right, this one goes, the darkest one goes to the left. So the way I render, it's towards that way. The top part goes towards this way, and the left side is going, the brush strokes are going that way. That's kind of what I intended, like that. Very quick and short strokes. I try to keep the same size of the brush stroke, and that should give me a uniform look to what I want. There's gonna be a little bit of a reflection here. And in the corners as well should be just a tiny little bit darker. Not too much though. Like that. Alright. Now this facing down, like here. Right there, it's facing towards the floor. Now I feel like this is a little too bright for that. I'm gonna go ahead and grab the burn tool. And now what does it do? Now if I pass over, wait, sorry, that's not the burn tool. This is the burn tool. So if I pass it over and I exaggerate it, it looks really bad, right? But if you change actually the settings here at the top, set it to midtones, exposure is okay, protect tones is okay, and now if I dab it in the areas where I want the shadow to be, it's really making it look natural. Now it's very important that you change the settings as you keep going, because if I keep going, there's still gonna be a burn effect. If that's what you want, that's fine, but that's not what I want. I want more of a matte kind of tone. Oops. So I'm gonna change it to highlights to affect my highlights, and if you notice, it becomes more grayish color, and that's what I want for this face of the cube, because it's pointing towards the floor and the floor is gray. Therefore, I'm gonna just make a selection here so it doesn't affect any of the other faces really quick. So, and now we can, there you go. Like, I feel like that's better. Now go back, change it to shadows, and I want the bottom part that's touching the floor to be a little bit more warm. So as long as you know what the tool does, you can always change the settings and make it apply what you want instead of the other way around. You're controlling the tool, not the other way around, right? So just a tiny little bit. Go back to my dodge tool. Now I feel like these two tools, dodge tool and burn tool, are very good for metal kind of work. I don't know, it just helps really a lot. Just gonna add a couple of just like that. Little glow here and there. Deselect everything and come back here. Add a little bit of a bounce light to it. And here too. And a little bit of a bounce light going across this. Now notice I use the tool. I'm going back in and painting over, because it'll never be 100% perfect. Sometimes it is, but more times than not, it's not gonna be exactly how it should be. It's still just a tool anyways. So I'll give it a couple of dabs like so. I feel like it's a little too saturated, so I'm gonna grab the floor. No, actually, just gonna do it manually. Pick a gray, like a gray from the red color, and just gently pass it over. I feel like it's a little too saturated in there. Alright, okay. That should be good. Nice. Clean up some of these edges. Like so. I feel like the top part of this face is still a little too bright. Let's go back to the burn tool. Actually, we can use shadows here on top, because the light comes from the top and this edge could be a little more saturated. So we're gonna dab it just a tiny little bit, like so. And since we're focusing on the color, I think one last adjustment I'm gonna do really quick is bring up my color balance. Now you can just go to image, adjustments, and color balance right there. And I feel like the magenta, I feel like my midtones are not strong enough in color. So I'm gonna give it a little bit of magenta, a little bit of red, and on the highlights, yellow or red. Right now we're just playing around to see. Oh, this is pretty nice. Actually, adding a little bit of green here helps with the yellow. So now our shadows. decided it was magenta, right? Just a little tweak. We don't want to overdo it. Press OK. And this is a before and after. You can see I keep going back and forth. You can see the differences. It's just a slight adjustment in the color, overall saturation. Now, scratches. That's the thing I almost forgot about, and we're gonna add that. Now these scratches are gonna be, I want them to be desaturated. Wait, wrong brush, I believe. So just gonna make a couple of scratches, not too much, just around the edges, like so. Give a little bit of character to it, even though it's polished. You know, it's not fully polished, I suppose, but enough to give it, to have a highlight, to have a yeah, enough to have a highlight, enough to have some light bouncing around here at the bottom right, so it's all good. Should I go again with the color dodge and pump this? Like, how polished do I want it to be? Yeah, okay, I feel like it gives a nice glow. So I'm actually gonna go, like, the light hits right there, goes across a little bit, and then gives a nice glow again, trying to give some character. No, I don't want that. Actually, around the area where it's glowing and where there's a highlight, I want to add a couple of scratches that follow the same path. Yeah, I feel that that's pretty nice. We can try one more time, bring up our good old replace color. I feel like this should be a tiny little bit darker, like so. Yeah, here make some speculars almost pure white, just a tiny little bit. I'm already making this a little rough looking. So yeah, I believe that's pretty much it. We got our raw gold, weathered steel, polished copper, and I think they look cool. What do you think? I hope you learned anything from it and you had a good time. I had a good time, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.